In the penultimate episode, we had many reveals and many big scenes, but was this episode too long and too heavy-handed? Let's find out. Hey guys, Cameron for Bloodline, Season 2, Episode 9, Part 22, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode, especially that huge scene in the last episode between Marco and John. It really seemed like big things were going to happen here, and yes, there was a lot of stuff revealed in this episode, but I'm not going to lie, this episode was kind of boring. I'm not going to lie, I was not that into this episode. I thought this episode was just, there was a lot going on, there was a lot revealed, and I don't say this a lot, but I think for once, the length actually hurts this episode. Now, a lot of times Bloodline benefits from it being long. It's just a long show. But this episode, I think it actually hurt the episode. I think this episode, there were way too many repetitive scenes. It got a little silly at times. And for me, I just wasn't really into it. Now, let me just say, there were some great scenes in this episode, definitely. But I don't think this was a great episode. I think the finale, I'm definitely looking forward to. It's just this episode in general, I thought there was just a lot going on. And, you know, or not enough going on, honestly. Not enough going on. There was just a lot of talking, not enough going on. Let's just get into this episode, because I just wasn't as into it as I wanted to be. And especially the first scene in this episode, which felt more like it should have been in last year's penultimate episode. I don't even know what it's doing here. We see John, he's flashing back to his teenage years with Danny. We see Danny talks about leaving the keys and starting a life on his own, and it's an interesting scene, definitely, you know, seeing why Danny wants to get out of there and encouraging John to leave with him. And we've kind of seen the keys as kind of like a villain at times. We definitely have seen that. Kind of like, you know, the keys is this one place where everyone seems to, you know, there's all this corruption and things like that, and things like that are going on. But for me, I just felt like this scene didn't really belong here. I didn't really need the scene to be in the episode. It was a good scene, it was a good way to start things off, but it just didn't really need to be here, and I don't really know why it was here. But anyway, we flash back to seeing Nolan and Eve. They're moving Nolan out of John's house, and they're actually moving into the hotel, and Nolan seems genuinely appreciated for his first time, and he actually says, you know, thank you for everything you've done, and it's his time to go, and I thought it was a good scene. I like seeing these two moving out, starting over, trying to get a new life. I like seeing that. But back in Meg's place, Meg then serves Marco coffee, completely unaware that he's likely about to serve her an arrest, basically, because he knows that obviously that she lied to him, and this was a good scene. I like the way this was done. Marco warns Meg about John without knowing that Meg is the one that knows what's going on. You know, she knows everything that John's done. So that's the thing with this episode, is that a lot of characters find out things that they really already know, so it kind of comes across as a bit silly. I mean, it's this stuff that they already know, they're acting like they didn't know. It just kind of didn't really work for me, which did a little bit silly, but I do like the way that Marco was really mad at Meg. You know, he kind of trusted her, and she broke that trust. He lied to her, you know, she lied to him, and this is really the first episode. You can tell Marco is not at all with this family. He's not all this family. He's now an enemy of the family, and in many ways, he's kind of like Danny, where he's kind of used to be a part of this family, and now he's really not at all, and they want nothing to do with him, and you definitely do see that. And a lot of the Marco scenes work really well, but there are a lot of scenes here, like I said, that just feel like carry-ons rather than add-ons to the episode. There's just stuff that kind of just, you know, is going on that we've already seen before, and it just kind of weighed down a lot of this episode for me because of the length and things like that. The episode went very slowly, and especially with this next scene. So we then see Chelsea, who I think is one of the characters that we haven't really seen much of this season, but she's hanging out with their mother, basically, and she's, you know, Eric and Chelsea's mother, she's puffing on a cigarette as Chelsea prepares her pills, and basically, we see she's living, we find a little bit more about their mother in this scene, and I thought that was interesting that we saw, but then Marco shows up to question Eric. That's the main reason why we're seeing this, and stuff like this, I just didn't really care. Why are we seeing Chelsea talking to her mother? I don't really think there was a point in seeing that, but basically, we see Marco shows up to question Eric, and Eric tells Marco that John lied about not seeing Danny the morning that he was killed, which I'm glad that Eric said that. I mean, Eric has proven to be one of the most loyal people towards Marco, and he's also very honest. He's not someone that's gonna lie. He very much cares about Danny, and I think they've really redeemed Erica this season, which is something I really have enjoyed. And he says they'll tell Marco if he can get full immunity from anything and everything. He gives one little nugget for Marco to run with, which is ask Janie about the seahorse necklace, because obviously Janie has connections to that. She knows what she's talking about, and that's what he decides to do. However, we then see Meg goes over with John to figure out what went down between him and Marco, because she knows obviously there was some sort of beef between these two. I mean, the way that Marco acted, he wasn't just upset with her. It obviously had something to do with John. She knew something happened there, and basically, John tells her straight out that Marco's not a family friend, and that the only way he can beat them is to turn them against one another, and that's the only way that he's going to be able to do that, and he's not going to let him do that. But you can already tell that's sort of happening the way this is going. That's when Meg comes clean about releasing the information from Aguirre, and she also tells John about Marco's involvement in Aguirre's domestic assault. The thing is, John already knows all these things, so again, this reveal isn't much of a reveal to either John or to the audience, because we both already knew these things, so it kind of just feels like, it's a random reveal. Had John not known about this, then this would have been a much more interesting scene. That's why John is so cool and collected about it, because I was trying to figure out why is John so cool and collected. I'm like, oh yeah, because he knows, and Meg says that she just can't release that information, and she's not going to do that. She's not going to do all that's going on there, because she's just not going to ruin Marco like that. Even though Marco's not a family friend right now, she's not going to just release his information. I mean, it's not right to do. She's not going to do that, and she's better than that. So I like that we saw that. I definitely thought that I like that she has some sort of limits, because we didn't really know if she did, and it seems like she definitely does. So John then starts a farmer, asks to see the footage from his private camera that leads to the beach, a camera that likely caught him going to the site where he drowned Danny. There's a lot of John looking at footage in this episode, and it gets quite repetitive after a while. A lot of John's stuff is just him looking at footage, and that's like the most boring stuff going on. But Ozzy then heads back to the hotel where he and Eve were staying with a guitar, but then he realizes that she's gone because obviously her and Nolan left, and he doesn't actually take it very well. But we can see that he doesn't really take it well, and even Nolan also are very pumped to get involved and be a part of the daily goings on. And I like how they kind of are becoming so close with Sally. In fact, they've kind of replaced her actual family. She's not as close with her actual kids right now. She's much closer with Eve and Nolan. That's something I thought was very surprising. I didn't see that coming at all, and I actually really am enjoying that. I like the way that that's going. So meanwhile with Diana and Janie, they're probably the two people that are actually somewhat get to live a normal life. They're just making small talk about addicting apps, which we barely get any normal conversations in the show. This I kind of liked, because as soon as she leaves, it gets, real quiet again. Diana says that, and she says to John that she's glad that he's gone, and for a second, John thinks she's talking about Danny and the fact that she's glad that Danny's gone, but she's actually meant Nolan, which is crazy, but you kind of understand why. I mean, Nolan represents everything about Danny. He makes them remember all the things that Danny did. They have to live with the fact that there's a kid living at their house whose father was killed by none other than her husband. So it's better for her now that he's gone, and it seems like Diane and John are actually on somewhat good terms. We've seen this episode, which I thought was interesting, but I do like seeing this darker side of Diana. I definitely like seeing that. But the next day, John goes, he visits this man, he asks for help getting to the footage on those private cameras, and he says that he'll do his best. And at the boatyard, Gilbert comes to visit Kevin, pass along his offer, providing that Kevin will stay, and again, you just feel like things aren't really going to be going well for Kevin. Just the way this seems to be going, I don't know if Kevin's going to fully redeem himself. But just as something good comes for them, we know that something bad happens. And Marco then comes to see Janie at school, and he asks her about the Danny necklace, but Janie tells her that it's gone. It is, because it's gone, and that John lost it, and that's exactly what happened. So Diana's watching this whole thing go down, which is very interesting that we saw. Obviously, it's a very innocent conversation, but she definitely knows that something is going down, and especially Marco trying to find the seahorse necklace, you do understand why, because obviously that necklace, that was the thing that set John off. That was the thing that made John attack Danny. And I've known a lot of people that said, oh, Janie's really annoying. I don't see it as Janie being annoying. I see it as Janie figuring things out. Janie's one of the ones that doesn't want to lie. She doesn't want to cover up things. She wants to admit what's going on. That's a natural reaction for a teenager to have, and especially someone that's a kid of one of the family members. It kind of makes sense why she's acting this way. So I honestly don't think Janie's annoying. I understand why she's acting this way totally, and especially with this seahorse necklace, Danny just gave it her. She didn't really think much of it. She didn't think that Danny was going to hurt her. Now, we probably knew that Danny was going to hurt her, but we don't really know if he was going to. So I do like that we saw that. I thought that was well done. Back on the beach, Nolan is raking the sand just like Danny used to. He waves up to Sally on the porch, and basically, she kind of likes this redo thing going on, the way that he kind of acts like Danny, and I think she also kind of thinks that she can help Nolan not turn into Danny. I think Sally kind of feels like she can do that, and she calls John, and we see Diana basically asks questions to John. She demands to know what's going on, because she knows that definitely something is going on. She knows something's going on, obviously, with Seahorse Necklace. When John won't give her answers, she hangs up, knowing that something's going on. I mean, at this point, she doesn't really trust him. She knows that something's going on, obviously. Marco then takes the little knowledge he got from Janie and Eric, and he goes back to the sheriff, and Eric heads to the pawn shop to pick up where he previously dropped off that seahorse necklace, and again, it's really bad, because we know that he's the one that now has a seahorse necklace, and that can't end well for anyone, so basically, a lot of this episode ends up like a chase scene. Who wants the seahorse necklace? It's a little bit ridiculous, but that's a big part of what this is. It's how do we find the seahorse necklace, tracking down the seahorse necklace, and it seems like that's really what this is all going to be, is about the seahorse necklace. But then we get into, you know, but like I said, I think this episode, this is one of the things that really kept this episode from being quite silly, and I really was not a huge fan of this part, but, you know, there were some things I definitely did enjoy. Just this whole thing I just thought was a little bit silly. Episode was between John and Marco. The problem was there just wasn't enough of it. There are so many great scenes between these two, but there's just as much of John looking at evidence or Marco looking at evidence, and it's just not nearly as interesting as when these two are together, because there's so much tension between these two. Marco knows something is going on, he doesn't know, and John's trying to keep him from figuring out what's going on, and it's just so much interesting stuff going on here. But in the office, John corners Marco and calls him out for questioning Janie at school. Marco brushes it off, though, because he has bigger plans, and you know that definitely something more is going on here. His intentions becoming more and more apparent. My main problem with this episode is actually Gilbert, I have to say, because I can't really figure out what they're trying to do with Gilbert. Look, Beau Bridges is doing a great job as this character, okay? It should definitely be noted that it has nothing to do with his performance. It's just the characterization of Gilbert feels like it's come out of nowhere. Gilbert was set up. Yes, he was definitely an abrupt guy. He was definitely kind of not cold-hearted, but definitely seemed a bit menacing. I didn't really think they were going this villainous direction with him they did in this episode, because he meets up with Meg to talk about the legal details behind Kevin's boathouse, and that interferes that he can siphon more money into John's campaign by hiring Meg for legal consulting, but it still makes absolutely no sense why he suddenly cares so much about this. Why does he care so much about what's going on there? It didn't really seem like he did. I mean, initially, if you remember, Meg just went to Gilbert to poke around. She went to Gilbert to poke around, see what was going on, and now, you know, they seem to have developed this really close friendship, which just seems like it's kind of come out of nowhere. But Ozzy and Eric then take this fishing trip, and they talk about how Eve left Ozzy, because obviously, you know, she did leave Ozzy, and how Meg paid Ozzy off. Eric opens up and tells Ozzy about how he's talked to the cops, which totally just ruins everything, because obviously Ozzy did not want him to do that, and he says they can get so much more info if they can hold on to that information and use it against John directly, because we know that obviously John is raw on both Eric and Ozzy. They both are very much against him, and we see Hank then calls back with information into that secret camera, and in the video you can clearly see John driving out to the beach in his truck, and Sally then finds Meg out on the dock, and I love this scene. I thought this was a great scene, actually. She finds her, you know, with Marco, and she talks about how whenever she had problems with the boy, she was away to the dock, and basically she says she would retreat to her family's private dock, and she also tells Sally about Kevin and the progress he's made in his life, and that's when Sally, we find out, gets a lot more vocal about Gilbert, and how definitely no matter what happened, even though Robert and Gilbert interacted, they definitely were not friends, and that's something that she needs to know, that Gilbert's not a good guy to be around, obviously needs to stay away from him. I really like the way they're setting this up. I like that she's saying, look, Gilbert is definitely dangerous to this family, need to be worried about him, and he definitely is very bad news. That stuff I thought was really well done, but you can also see that Sally definitely is not really, you know, she's not really on her kid's side right. Well, not really not on her kid's side, but it seems like she's not really as close with her kids. It seems like she's distancing herself from them, and there's definitely a lot more with, you know, what's going on with, like I said, you know, there's a lot more going on right now with, you know, her, Eve, and Nolan. That's kind of what she wants her family to be. You know, they're kind of the normal ones right now, and they're really not normal, and she kind of wants that normality in her life. You know, she wants a sense of normalcy, and she can't really get that anywhere else, and I think you definitely do get the characterization from Sally in this episode, and that's something I definitely really did enjoy. So after hearing what Sally just told her about Gilbert, Meg tells Kevin that maybe Gilbert isn't the best financial support, because obviously he's not really a good guy, but Kevin's not interested in hearing about it. He gets very arrogant, says that he thinks Meg's scared that if he gets better, she won't have a screw-up to feel superior to, and I get what he's saying, but at the same time, Kevin was just so stubborn in this episode. I mean, she's making very valid points that obviously Sally said that Gilbert's no good. I mean, the logical thing to do would be to not let Gilbert get involved in this, and none of the kids realize, though, that Sally, like I said, has replaced all three of the kids with Nolan and Eve. You can totally tell that's what's going on. And I really love the scene between Nolan and Eve. It's one of the only normal scenes we get here. We see, you know, Eve is singing a song, talking about how Danny couldn't sing. Nolan's being very respectful. Eve's kind of put on pants, and she's actually disciplining her child. It seems somewhat normal, and I like that. Sally hasn't had this much power. She actually feels like the matriarch for once, which she hasn't in a while, and you know, it's just something that Sally hasn't been used to. She's never really been in power. She actually knows what's going on. She feels like she's in control, and I think that's why Sally feels so much at peace here, because here she feels in control. She feels like she's a part of it. She feels like she's not being kept out of it. Everyone else, it feels like they're keeping her out of things, and it's obviously understandable why. They don't want her to freak out, and they don't want to put more pressure on her, but I feel like it'd be better if they tell Sally at this point. Sally just feels like, no, you know, everyone's not trusting her, and that she can't really trust anyone, and really at this point, you know, Nolan and Eve are the only people she really trusts, and it's sad, but I think that definitely is what's going on, and you definitely do see that here. So we then see actual pictures of Danny drowning, and it's really bleak, honestly, just seeing those pictures, which I thought was a bit unnecessary, but I think it's really supposed to show, again, the guilt just looming over John. We see also, you know, tons of nightmares, all the details starting to emerge, including the date of September 18th, which is the same day that John is caught driving to the beach, and Marco's laying up all of his facts and figures with his full intention of pouncing on John, but John's working on a plan of his own, clearly with Miss Ortiz. He goes to see her, presumably to launch his own campaign against Marco and Aguirre, which I think would make sense, obviously. Miss Ortiz, you know, is divorced from Aguirre. He can use Miss Ortiz to turn against Aguirre, but would she really turn against them? We don't really know. And we know that she was trying to keep those, you know, that whole idea of what Aguirre did repressed, but it seems like John actually wants to acknowledge what happened, acknowledge what Aguirre was doing, acknowledge what was going on there. It totally seems like he wants to actually release what was going on with Aguirre and how Marco was the guy that was the lawyer with Aguirre, and we know that Meg didn't, but I think it's just really showing that this really is starting to break John. I mean, we've been seeing that, but this really is starting to hurt John. He's really starting to go dark, and you definitely do see that in this episode, and I think that's something they did show very well. A little bit too well, definitely. I think we definitely kind of got a bit heavy-handed with the idea of, oh, John's going dark. Definitely we saw that. I kind of want to see less of John going dark and just have him actually just completely go dark. I want to see that happen. We're not really seeing that, and I definitely do want to see that there, so I thought that definitely was interesting. So what's going on? There's obviously an investigation going on about him. You know, he knows that definitely something is happening, and basically, you know, he knows he's trying not to let that happen, but he's also been opening one against John, you can tell. You know, he hasn't really tried to, but he kind of is, and Marco then calls Eric, leaves him a message that he needs information to give him immunity because he wants to make sure that nothing bad can happen to him, and Eric flashes back to the day of the murder, leaving Danny behind, and it's a good scene. I like seeing Eric have that, you know, grieve definitely, and have that guilt that he left Danny behind, how he feels is kind of his fault because he could have stopped it. And then he flashed back to the moment that he went back to find him and found that ominous seahorse necklace instead, and that's how he found the necklace, basically, because that was the last thing that he saw. So definitely they're starting to put things together as to what's going on, and Gilbert then shows up to pick up paperwork from Kevin, but Kevin seems a bit nervous. Now that Meg has kind of told him what's going on, Kevin really doesn't know if he can trust this guy. We see he assures Gilbert, though, that he's ready to sign on with him. He passed the papers over. He says they'll go out for dinner to celebrate, and then he'll hear from him soon. And it seems super low, and, you know, Kevin's telling him to take his time. Gilbert just walks away, which is a really, really just ominous scene. Really well done the way that was done, but it just really shows, I think, how not trustworthy Gilbert really is. He definitely seems to have some sort of ulterior motive, but Eve then meets up with Ozzy, shares some of that money that Meg gave him. He says that they should go back to the hotel, but Eve says she can't because she's staying with Sally right now, and Ozzy tells her that she really worked that situation, but Eve says that they're her family. Eve tries to break it off with Ozzy, but it's no good, obviously, because Meg then watched them chat it up for entirely too long, and I really like the scene between Meg and Sally because Meg's points really aren't wrong. Meg seems to think that Eve really has ulterior motives, and this idea is that does Eve really want to move in with Sally, or does she really have ulterior motives? And we don't know. I mean, remember, Eve showed up just wanting money. That's what she wanted, and basically, she gets super upset about it. Sally gets fired up and tells Meg all about her history and how it's her own call on whether Eve and Nolan stay. As for Meg, she'll just have to deal with it. Really, that's Sally's, Sally gets to make that call. If they want to stay for as long as they want, they can stay as long as they want. They want to stay there for the rest of their life. That's what's going to go. Unless Sally sees something's off, then she's going to kick them out. It's really not Meg's call to do that. And yeah, I get what Sally's trying to say. She's trying to say, look, you're not in control of my life anymore. I'm in control of my life. You guys have kept me in the dark, so I'm going to keep you in the dark and now let you make a decision, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do, but I get what Sally's trying to do here. They've kept her in the dark. She's keeping them in the dark. There's a lot of keeping people in the dark. She doesn't want to do that anymore, so she's going to keep them in the dark, which I think was the smart thing to do, definitely. But then we see Kevin. He's just trying to kick, the nose cane, the tequila shots, and the risky behavior. He's hanging around the boatyard when Luis and his buddy come out to take the boat out, but that's basically all we get here, except for Luis saying that he looks forward to seeing more of Kevin, and we get the sense that Gilbert was the one behind all this, that Gilbert seems to be the one that gave Kevin all of these drugs, because we know definitely there was something going on there. He's the one that's kind of set Kevin off, and it seems like he's dead set on kind of ruining Kevin and getting him back into that territory. It just seems like it's kind of come out of nowhere, the idea that Gilbert is this guy that is just really corrupted and that he's the one that's wanted to destroy Kevin. It just seems like it's kind of come out of nowhere. It seems like it's just he's kind of a plot device rather than actual character. And again, Beau Bridge is doing a great job, but as good as he is, Gilbert just seems like a plot device. That's really what he seems like to me, and it's not really, working in the way I think the show wants it to. So Marco and John, the meet up in the darkness. John says that if Marco continues down this road, it's not going to end well. And Marco says that it's not going to end well for either of them because he knows that John's obviously starting something against him. He's starting something against John. So really, either of their careers, it's not going to end well either way. And later that night, John breaks into Marco's office. He searches through Danny's files, giving us, this unwelcome look again at those drying pictures. And I just really didn't think this was necessary to see those drying pictures again. I don't really know why I need to see that. But basically, in his timeline, he sees that Marco thinks that John met Danny and that Eric gave him an information, but most of all, he sees the request for Eric's immunity. He goes back to review the security footage again. We see flashback and just see just how Meg and Kevin and John got Danny from the beach, but also how Ozzy's car came through as well as Eric's van, and they saw the whole thing pretty much go down. They saw that definitely something was going on there, and I thought it was a good scene because we never actually saw what Kevin, Meg, and John did. We just heard about it, and basically, Justy finds that Eric basically shows up at Marco's house to tell his story and shares that he's the one that has the necklace. He's going to say that he's the one that's going to do it. It seems like there's going to be a chase now for John, Marco, Meg, Eric, and Ozzy, and that is the way the episode ends. Like I said, good stuff overall. Let's just get into this episode. So like I said, for me, this episode wasn't bad. I didn't think this was a bad episode. Just for a penultimate episode, it was a little bit weak. There was a lot of repetitive conversations. There was a lot of stuff we've seen before. The John and Marco stuff just doesn't feel as earned as it should, doesn't feel as intense as it should, and I want to feel a little more intense. I want to feel a little more tension there, and I'm not really getting that tension that I want. I definitely want a little more going on. There's not as much going on as I want there to be. Definitely, I think there could be a lot more going on there. That's definitely not as interesting as it should be. Now, as far as the whole thing going on with Eve, does Eve have ulterior motives? I mean, it definitely is a good question. Should Sally really trust Eve? I mean, it definitely seems a bit abrupt that they've just randomly moved in and now Sally trusts them. Definitely, I don't know if she can really trust them. I think that definitely is very interesting. Gilbert, like I said, I think it's just a little bit quick that he suddenly wants to destroy Kevin. That's what it seems like he wants to do. He's dead set on destroying Kevin. He wants to take his place. Seems like that's what's going on there. We'll have to see what happens with that. That's going to be interesting. Is John really going to start this case against Marco? I mean, it's really, I think, just going to make things worse. Marco's warning that, look, you do this, it's going to ruin both of us. And I don't think John really realizes that because Marco doesn't want to start something against John. But if he hears that John starts something against him, he will, without a doubt, start something against John. Which, again, I totally see why Marco's doing this because Marco doesn't see the John that he knows. The John that he knows would not do this, but the John that he knows is gone. John's not really who he used to be. This is a much darker John that we haven't seen before, and I do like seeing that. I think that definitely is interesting. What is going to happen with the seahorse necklace? We'll have to see what's going on with that. That's going to be interesting as well, and I really think that's it, guys. Like I said, not much to talk about with this episode. This was a lot of repetitive conversations, things we've seen before. We're finally putting those puzzle pieces together. Marco's figuring out what's going on. I think a lot of the characters, I'm definitely looking forward to the finale. I think the finale is going to be really great. There's going to be a lot of chasing going on, but I really think the biggest thing is that everyone's going to find out. I think Sally's definitely going to find out. Marco's going to find out. I think pretty much everyone's going to know by the end of the finale. Definitely that's going to happen. Don't tell me what happens in the finale, because I don't want to know, but I'm very happy. I'm finally going to be finishing the season. I will definitely get my review up for the season finale tomorrow. That's definitely going to be up. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. Love your thoughts on it. For me, again, not a bad episode, just a bit slow for my taste. I think there was a bit not too much going on. There was just a bit too much talking, a bit too much conversation, not enough really going on in the sense of where we're headed in the finale. I think we know we're headed in the finale, but we don't really know. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. Have your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for this week of Big Brother 18, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.